Hi, everyone, and welcome to Purple Coach Conversations with Tanya and myself, Anne. So our goal is to normalize, educate, and inspire conversations around inclusivity and diversity. We're both coaches, entrepreneurs, and mothers. While we're not diversity experts, our aim is to have conversations around something that is interesting and unique around race, diversity, inclusion. So today we've got a really special guest, Anita. Hi, Anita.
Hi, Anne. Hi, Tanya.
And she has a lot of accreditations to her name. She is a corporate coach, a personal coach. She's also a mentor to coaches as well. Her background is in law, and she's a qualified lawyer as well, and has worked in the corporate world. But Anita, I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself a bit more. I think you'll do it justice better than I can. I think you've just got such an interesting and amazing background. So welcome, Anita, to Purple Coach Conversations, and do please share with us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much, Tanya and Anne, for having me here. Like yourselves, I'm also a mum and business owner. I am a coach, as you've mentioned, Anne. But yeah, my life did start out in law. And if I kind of go back prior to that, I was the first in my family actually to go to university, and really, really passionate about law because of how I perceived it as being all about fairness and equality, virtues that were really important to me then and also continue to be, to me now. So I became a lawyer and thoroughly enjoyed, studying law. There were some challenges there which led to me to shift careers, and I moved into legal recruitment, which actually was a great transition into the coaching because I was doing so much relationship building, working long term with individuals to really figure out what was right for them, what was going to make them tick, what was going to create longevity for them in their careers. And the more that I continued into that, it felt like coaching was a natural transition. I personally wanted to go even further. So that's why I then moved on to become a credentialed coach with the International Coach Federation. So yeah, I run my own business, working with diverse professionals, really helping them to fulfill their dreams in their careers or in their life. Largely, it is around career development, progression, kind of getting away from being stuck. Also, as a mentor for coaches, I actually support mentors with their actual skills in terms of really excelling in the way that they can then best serve their clients, which is obviously for us all on this this interview really, really important. We want to do so much for our clients. But because of the sort of stage of life I'm at as well, I've got older children, so I'm able to do so much more as well. So I also support an organisation called Aspiring Solicitors, which is a diversity platform which supports people from lower socioeconomic groups, people of colour, LGBT, those that may have a disability or long-term health condition, really supporting them to access the legal profession, which is still regarded as being led by the kind of dominant white male group. So there I also provide coaching and mentoring with a view to really helping to change. I guess what we're doing is trying to change the profession. Yeah. Just very briefly, I also run a group for coaches where we come together on a fortnightly basis just to really enhance our skills, our understanding, just supporting each other as coaches, a kind of go-to club, if you like. And if that wasn't enough, I also host a small women's networking group called Synergy, which is all about women who have the same kind of passion in business. We're sort of synergizing our interests amongst ourselves around business, around well-being, and so forth. Really just allowing everybody to have a voice, especially I think because for women in business, often it feels like quite a step up. And sometimes we just need a little bit of encouragement to speak, to be assertive, to go out and network, and so forth. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, what an impressive schedule that you have. Yeah, I would love to hear how you manage your time and how you create those bucket of time to do all of this. And it's really inspiring to hear about this, this support group of coaches in particular, because I was actually listening to a podcast, Dave Stahovia, coaching for leaders this morning, and one of the guests was actually saying how much the support group, how important that support group was, not just for the advice that you receive, but for giving advice to others, and how that simple fact of giving advice to others is therapeutical to actually building your sense of confidence. It's not just whatever you receive, but whatever you give, and it's that giving that actually creates that confidence. And I'm just wondering, just as a side note, how much of when you're a mentor for coaches and they come to you and they ask you what we were discussing before the interview, when they ask you for feedback, whether they're following the guidelines and how they can improve, etc. How do you include that topic of diversity and inclusion when you, let's say, you feel that there's something that can be done around those lines in terms of them understanding their client better, maybe because they come from a diverse background? Have you had to have those sort of conversation with coaches that maybe weren't aware of that? And I'm just curious to hear if you have an example around that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I don't think there's enough diversity in the coaching sector, generally, and that would potentially mean there's not enough understanding of what it might mean to work with diverse clients. And so I think I'm fortunate that, I haven't had it come up that often, but where I notice it, obviously we've got to be in our coach's mindset and impartial and so forth. So in terms of, if it was generally with a coach in coaching or in mentoring, for me, it's about that open question and enabling, being that enabler, that facilitator, so that the coach can kind of think for themselves what they are doing, what else they can be doing. But in my kind of the coaches circle, which we call elevate, in terms of elevating the profession through the discussions that we have, within those conversations, those are conversations, and there we can be more direct and more influential amongst this group. And because of my experience, I am able to provide more sort of maybe direct support, which is really around, I think, stepping back and just having compassion and empathy to be able to see something through somebody else's lens. So not just you're looking at it through your lens, but actually you're going to pause and you're going to reflect on something through someone else's lens, which includes how they might feel. And I think that's part of the missing piece, that lots of people think they have that compassion and empathy and ability to understand what other people may be going through, but actually, do people always stop and think, how might they feel? So I think there are two lenses, really: the lens we see through, but actually what lens we feel through.
I think that's a really important point that you've said. As coaches as well, we always talk about empathy and being able to step into our client's position and seeing it from their perspective and so on. But I think the feeling factor that you've just mentioned as well is a different, because how they perceive things and how they feel about something else is completely different, or it can be very, very different. And being able to understand the difference between the two, I think, is such a powerful tool to have as a coach.
Yeah, and I think it's also about being non-judgmental as people try to have that compassion and empathy and greater understanding. We can only hope for things to to change and to evolve, but without judgment. We're not expecting people to understand things overnight. This is complex.
Yeah, it is complex. And like you said, being able to walk into someone else's shoe, I hope I'm saying the sentence properly. You can do that really with proper exercises in coaching. And that's why it's quite powerful to use. And I remember when I was getting training as a coach, we did that exercise, and I had to pick up someone. And I had picked up, my mother-in-law, in terms of, trying to understand certain things that I wasn't able to understand. And it's true that, by just asking questions, what do you feel? What do you see? What do you think? Just those 3 questions, without having to ask, you don't answer any other questions but those 3 in that specific exercise of I'm not sure that's the one you would use yourself. I'm sure you use many others, but in that specific one where you actually do a positioning and you look at the other person, etc. And it was quite powerful to really have those emotions. I didn't think it would be possible to actually empathize in what she was seeing about me, and and vice versa. And it really changed, now the way when I speak with her, my interactions with her, etc. I understand more because I've been asked those questions: feel, see, and think. And I think that's very powerful. And for the diversity and inclusion aspect as well, even though I don't know if as a white person I'll ever be able to understand, because I'll never be discriminated for my skin color, right? So it's I can just try my best, I guess. And I was wondering, to go back to your experience as a lawyer, when you started, you shared with us your struggles and how you overcame them, etc. Would you mind just going through a bit when you started as a lawyer, what made you who you are today, basically?
Yeah, sure. Before I do that, one of the things that's come up for me as you shared is actually ask, not assume. And the more we ask rather than generalize or assume, that in itself also makes a difference. But yeah, when I was so passionate about becoming a lawyer, because I really wanted to help people, that was always my passion. I want to help people. And I was fortunate enough to get a job in a top city, corporate law firm. And it was one of those things that, wherever you've come from, this is such an opportunity, you've got to grasp it. But what I could not anticipate was, what the culture would be like until I was actually there. And my experience, unfortunately, was quite challenging, because what I felt was that I was in an environment where there were no relatable role models, right? There was no one there like me, Asian, female, state school educated. There was just nobody. And what I found was that almost as soon as I got there, I was ignored. If I was spoken to, it was almost like contempt. But at the time, as a young Asian woman going into this big wide world, I just accepted it. But also what I realized with hindsight was there's also a cultural element to this, that from a cultural perspective and my upbringing, you don't speak till you're spoken to, you respect elders and so forth. And so here I was with this whole group, hundreds and thousands of people I didn't know and didn't actually know how to relate to. So it is possible I had my own internal barriers as well, but I just could not be aware of them at that time. That's something that came later on. But while I was there were also various comments that made me feel pretty insignificant. For example, there was a time where somebody from the kind of white dominant group asked me why I don't wear a sari to the office. And as an Indian person, for me, it was so obvious that I would not do that. But to this person, rather than just inquire about my background and have an interest in me, the person, that was the question that came out. And it really threw me. And I know I'm not the first person that's had questions like that put to them. But when those questions like that are thrown at you, it kind of throws you a bit, because you just think, how do I even answer that? To me, it's very obvious, but you haven't actually got to know who I am. You've just come in with a question like that, which is, it felt so inappropriate in the workplace. But I also didn't feel I had a voice, right? This is the dominant group. I'm in an environment, a culture here in the office I'm not used to. There'd been no proper induction. I didn't feel I had a voice. And then it just continued in that vein. And, you know, another comment that was made, you know, off the record, so to speak, was about how, you know, Asian women are likely to have their children early, which is an assumption. I appreciate you, you know, they were not able to ask, but it was a really big assumption. And assumptions like that jeopardize a person's career, because that kind of bias, as we know, means, you know, we're out the door before you've even considered us on our merits. So those kind of challenges left me feeling really out of place. And I didn't feel like a legal career there was for me. It was really challenging, had a lot of anxiety. Partly also because, you know, it takes a long time to qualify as a solicitor. You know, my family were really proud and so forth, you know, and I must have, you know, I went through anxiety for about a year before I decided I've got to give this up and I've got to move into something which is going to be more rewarding for me, more purposeful for me, maybe where I am actually doing what I want to do, which is help people. So that's when I transitioned into legal recruitment and then moved on to the coaching.
I think it's so important to understand as well, like when you're, especially I think when you're beginning your career, but at any point, that kind of microaggressions that a lot of people of color go through. And sometimes people go back and go, oh, but it wasn't a big deal. And then you go, no, it was a big deal because the intention behind it, you know, was racially motivated. It wasn't like, why aren't you asking the same questions of white people of why they're not dressing in a particular way, like, you know, and there's definitely a racial aspect to, you know, the comment about having kids early. Again, you know, it's all these little microaggressions as people of color, you pick it up and it adds on and adds on and adds on, and just you become so aware of either you're not really wanted or you don't really fit in, and you are different and you stand out for all the you stand out simply based on your race and nothing else. And it's, I'm not surprised when you said you went through anxiety for a whole year, but how unfortunate that you had to go through something like that simply based on race, not your performance, not on your ability to be a good employee. It's just based on race. And I think these are the kind of conversations that people need to have more often to understand what you're saying to your staff, even if it sounds quite quote unquote innocent, to be aware that words do carry meaning, and they do carry an impact. And that kind of, I'm glad anyway, in this time and age, that we're doing more training around that and understanding what is appropriate and what is not appropriate.
Yeah, and it's thanks for sharing that. And also it's race and gender in your case as well, like having children early. Of course, it's linked to, you know, the coming from a country that, you know, may marry their daughters early, etc. But it's generalizing also race, but also gender, which is what we encounter. Even the ladies that I coach still today, there's some white ladies I coach today, and they're suffering from the fact, you know, that they come back from maternity leave, and it still exists. It's still a struggle as well, this gender bias, that assumptions that people may have, and that they might not be as performant or working as hard if they work from home and they have to be in the office. And it's a constant struggle. So thank you for showing us how you fight this and how you've created this Aspiring Solicitors to help others. And I just have a question before we move on to the next one that we had prepared, which was, if you could tell something to your younger self, you know, that started, you know, what would it be? What advice would you tell her? She's gone through a lot.
You know, I would just say, be yourself, be authentic. Yeah, just be true to yourself, know your values and stick to them, rather than succumb to the limiting beliefs which are often put on you by external sources.
That's a great one. Yes, you know, how to build resilience against the said saying of others, and because that's what I find is the hardest, you know, those little aggressions that you, or little sentences that will just destabilize your confidence, and then you're looking for evidence of that, of those sentences, that they become part of your identity, and then it's really hard to overcome them, right? So just be yourself, no matter no matter what others are saying.
Absolutely. And that's a really important part. I mean, I work with clients who, you know, are also, you know, in their 40s and 50s, you know, just experts in their field. But because of past experiences that do go back to the early stages in their career, they still have those insecurities, because what's happened is those beliefs have just kind of continued to sort of manifest. Now they continue to project this great profile and so forth, but in reality, under the surface, so, you know, underneath that iceberg, you know, they're really struggling to be their true self. And I certainly find in, you know, with my clients, that that's one of the things that's coming up more and more and more is, look, I just want to be myself, but I don't even know how to, because they haven't been for so long. So unraveling that is it's fulfilling, it's purposeful, but I think it can also be scary.
I think so too. I work with my clients as well. One of the areas that I work with them around is clarity and self-clarity. And I find it's always one of the most aha moments for my clients as they unravel who their authentic self is, especially when you start taking out the layers of society norms, cultural norms, religious norms, and just going, who are you authentically? When you shed all those you shoulds and should nots and everything that you know has been pre-programmed in you to believe that you should exist in a certain way, and then kind of shedding that off and going, how would you like to exist? But it's a whole process, as you all know, but it's such a powerful place when they get there to their authentic self.
It really is. It's exciting for us as well, isn't it?
It is. It brings me to the question as well, Anita. You started aspiring coaches. Tell us a little bit more about that and what inspired you to do that. I think it's a fascinating project that you run, and work as well that you do. So tell us.
Do you mean the solicitors?
Yeah, sorry, aspiring solicitors.
Yes. So
sorry.
Just to be clear, I haven't started that. That's been started by somebody called Chris White. But what Aspiring Solicitors does is it's a diversity platform to support students from diverse backgrounds to access the law profession, because as we know, it is still dominated by, you know, higher socioeconomic white males. There are lots of statistics around that can be found online, but what we do is coach and mentor and provide events and services that are going to support people to build their confidence, just generally, but also in relation to applications and effective skills that are going to support them. So if we were to imagine that people from diverse backgrounds may, especially from, let's say, lower socioeconomic background, perhaps, they're less likely to have what we might call the polish in terms of effective written communication skills. And that's where we can support them. But it's not done from a place of, we're going to tell you exactly what to do. We have to make them think, right? Because if you've got to this stage and you're a law undergraduate or another graduate that's going to look to transition into law, you know, there's an assumption really that you've got it in you to do this. Like, we do start from that premise that, look, you are worthy and you deserve to be here and you deserve to be a solicitor if that's the way you want to go. So part of that means, you know, with my coaching hat on, is I want them to own it. So I don't want to just be telling people what to do. I want them to identify in themselves where they need the support, where they need that development, and then collectively in partnership we can work on supporting those individuals so that when they get to writing applications, they're much more polished. And the issue is really, especially with the kind of lower socioeconomic groups, unfortunately, depending on which regions they live in as well, and the type of schooling and so forth, they just don't have that support. They don't have access to the resources. They don't have access perhaps to, you know, connections, parent groups and so forth that can enable access into the, you know, this type of career or other professional services. So our platform, I think, is, I mean, it's one of the things that attracted to me is because it's so powerful in enabling change. You know, that's really fundamentally what we do. We want more people from diverse backgrounds to get into the profession. We want to change the landscape, basically.
I think that's so important. You know, as you mentioned as well, I think it's kind of goes without saying that law is one of those industries is very white male dominant. And if you come from a particular social kind of background where perhaps, you know, we talk about like middle class or upper class, you've had your certain family members in such professions, whether it's finance or law and so on, and they've learned to navigate this world because they already exist in that world. It's, if you're not from that kind of background, it can be very challenging. Just as, you know, you mentioned yourself, that you're not white male and all these other challenges as well. And then you, as you mentioned, you look at the social economic factor as well, and have they been exposed to be able to navigate in that world, which is again quite I don't want to say prestigious, but I think it feels like a very upper class, middle class kind of environment. And I think it's amazing work. And as you're saying, changing the narrative of what law should look like, and it shouldn't just be male, white dominant. And if you're not that, then you feel like you struggle to fit in or to navigate yourself around that environment.
Yeah, and I think it's also an issue once somebody's in the profession that, you know, where's the progress for people who are from diverse backgrounds? You know, it's not just at entry level. And, you know, when I'm working with clients from a diverse background, and I do work a lot with qualified lawyers, you know, that sense of, do I really belong? Is this really, you know, what I should be doing? You know, change is happening in the profession, you know, but as I said earlier, it's complex and it's going to take a lot of time. I think what we have to do is praise the industry for perhaps what it is embarking on, what it is doing. You know, we've got the Corporation of London Task Force on Social Mobility, for example. There are all sorts of initiatives and things that law firms are doing to support diversity, which I'm really happy to see, but I think it's still got a long way to go, unfortunately.
That brings me to the second question is, you know, on this topic of feeling like you belong and so on. And I know last time we spoke, you mentioned about feeling like you don't have a voice. And I think it's something I can completely identify with, that when you're in certain situations as a person of color, you feel like you don't have a voice. And then the option becomes just to be silent and not say anything, even if you really, really wanted to. Tell us a little bit more about your experience around this, because I think for our listeners as well, anyone who's, I think a lot of people of color have felt this, have experienced this, where you want to speak up about something, but for one reason or another, you feel like you don't have a voice. And yeah, share with me a little bit more about your experience in this.
Yeah, I think it did start, you know, it started in my career as a lawyer, where, you know, being ignored, you start to sort of internalize, you know, am I worthy? Does my voice even matter? Is my voice of value? And if you're ignored enough, you start to believe you're not good enough and you're not worthy, you've got nothing valuable to say, or so forth. I remember one example, I'd got some praise from a client, which I vocalized to a supervisor, and the supervisor didn't acknowledge it, but then literally criticized the client for praising me. So it was another dig, you know, at what I am potentially capable of, you know, what my merits are and so forth. And I think you keep layering things like that on top of each other, you can't help but start to take it personally. I think you've got to be pretty thick-skinned to not. And maybe, you know, at that time I wasn't. I'm certainly a different person now. But the problem with not having a voice is you feel so undervalued, if valued at all. It's like other people making a judgment and saying to you, you're not good enough. You're not good enough for us to listen to. And actually, who is anyone else to decide that? And, you know, even when I changed careers and I moved into recruitment, I found that a little bit. But it's only actually with age, experience, and hindsight, I realized how much I didn't have a voice. Because I think what happened is I, like others, these microaggressions, the ignoring and so forth, I think we just end up succumbing to it. We almost think, well, what can we do?
Exactly.
You know, what do we, the choices are, okay, we could leave that job, but is it going to be different anywhere else? You know, you could sue your employer if you really wanted to, but, you know, you'd have to have really, you know, substantial grounds. So I think a lot of us just succumb to it because I think without greater emotional awareness, without greater self-awareness, I think we can, as I say, we can succumb to what others may impose as our limitations.
Yeah.
So they are imposed by external sources, but we take them on and believe them as our own, and we do nothing. And for me, with experience, I think becoming a mother to daughters was also a powerful moment for me that change has to take place. And one of the reasons I started the Synergy networking group for women was to give them a voice. Now, if I said to you I'm a natural introvert, you might not believe me. I can't believe that that's what I did to set up that group. But what I found was by giving women a platform, more women were drawn to me. And the fact that I was able to provide that as a platform, a safe space for people to practice their voice, can you believe it? Literally was practice your voice. Was so rewarding that it then led me to have even greater confidence to just continue to support others in having a voice. And that's what we do at Aspiring Solicitors as well, you know. So that part of my world, if you like, we're also doing that for others. So wherever you have come from, you absolutely deserve to have your voice heard.
That's fantastic. I love how you use the word practice, because it's creating a possibility in the mind, right? When you practice, even if it hasn't happened yet, you allow it to happen, right? It becomes a thought, and then the brain doesn't know if it has happened or not, right? It will take it into something that has already happened. So then there's more chance and more possibilities, and you're opening for things to materialize. And it's very much what you were saying about, you know, this concept of when you hear negative comments that get repeated and you don't have anybody that might be there to mentor you or sponsor you, the erosion is not just on your self-esteem, but it's also on your true sense of self, or your true sense of worth and confidence. And that takes a long time. And you mentioned you have 2 daughters, the teenagers, and how involved you are in working with young people. And I just want to hear about how your involvement is with schools. Is it with aspiring solicitors that you starting the journey of like interacting with schools, etc.?
I've actually been supporting schools on a voluntary basis for over 10 years, supporting, again, you know, state-run school kids in terms of things like confidence, their CVs, and helping them to draw out their strengths. So it's independent of aspiring solicitors, but it goes back to giving everybody a fair chance for me. And I feel that when we can support individuals in school where perhaps you know, they haven't got the resources or the support to actually identify their own skills, that's where somebody like myself can come in. Just to even spend half an hour with each child and just look at their CV and just talk to them, you know, open questions, get them to think a little bit. And, you know, just to recognize things like, okay, I'm co-captain of the football team, but I'm not necessarily academically strong. So tell me about how you develop your team skills as co-captain. How do you lead the team? How do you motivate them? What leads to success in that team? And just to get them to think about it for themselves in that way, literally within half an hour, you can change their mindset about what is possible. And for me, that's really powerful because, you know, even if you can change just one child's perspective on what is possible and the next step they then take, that's, I mean, that's just bliss, right? That's what we should continue to do. So that's part of what I do. And I'm also, I am a school governor for a school. And because of my background in careers, I support them with sort of career support, especially with regard to, you know, the legal profession, just providing, you know, whatever information I can, which will enable them to have greater awareness of how to access law. Because with state schools in particular, as I said earlier, there's a lack of resource and a lack of insight as to whether this is even a profession I can go into, and I want that to change.
Wow. Anita, I feel like I could talk to you forever, but I am aware of time. So just to finish off, I would love to hear about a book that you'd recommend. And I know you were going to give us a little reading from the book as well. If perhaps you can tell us about the book and then do the reading for us, that would be great.
Absolutely. So you probably can't see this clearly, but the book is How the World Thinks. And the reason I love this book is because it's all about having an understanding of each other, whatever our background, whatever our culture, whatever our history. And it's only through greater understanding that actually we can become a better world. So this is why it's really important to me. And the part that I wanted to share, because values also straddle continents, seeing how other cultures live is a way of reflecting on our own. Each provides a kind of living experiment in what would happen if we valued this a little less and that a little more. Given that no culture can claim to have cracked how to live, the lessons we can learn from our varying histories and philosophies are more precious than ever.
Oh, that is such a beautiful passage. It's really, and it's so true. It transcends continents, like values and understanding transcends continents, and looking at other cultures to see how to live a better and more inclusive life. And I love that no culture has cracked the code of how to live. That. Well, and it's so true. It's so true. Tanya, do you want to?
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And we'll make sure to include the quote in the notes as well as the book references that you've mentioned. And is there anyone you think we should be following or learning from that you believe we should look into?
Yeah, so somebody I follow is a chap called Asif Sadiq, and he leads diversity and inclusion at Warner Brothers. He was previously at Adidas and The Telegraph, and he shares very frequently some really powerful insights, information, tips, awareness around improving diversity, barriers, and so forth. So he is definitely one to follow.
Lovely. Maybe he'll be one of our guests one day.
Yeah, try and track him down.
Indeed, we have to dream. We have to dream sometimes. Thank you so much, Anita. And in terms of getting to reach you, if our audience needs to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to speak to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a really simple way to get hold of me. So Anita Gohil-Thorp, there's only one of me with my name. So it should be really easy to find me. Or my website is just www.anitagohilthorpe.com.
Fantastic. Make sure you follow Anita on LinkedIn, sorry. And to everyone who joined today, thank you so much. Make sure you check our Facebook group and our future and past interviews. And wherever you are, have a great, great day. Thank you again, Anita.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.